Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. Just when you thought the sports world was in a slumber, it takes a big stretch and a yawn, and not only that, but it's also ready to roar, as the latest podcast is on deck, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with Joe's JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard, and for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle, or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And yes, we have a lot to sink our teeth into when it comes to what is happening in the sports universe over the last few days. And I have to start off with baseball. Yes, I'll get to Scottie Scheffler. Yes, I'll get into Lloyd Howell, the former, now NFLPA executive director who just went off the rails and having to resign abruptly. And even the guy that looked like was going to be the heir apparent said, I don't want any part of this. I'll touch on that. Dustin Poirier, a lot to get into, but I'll start off with what happened as baseball comes out of the break, and a very interesting weekend as we break it down. And I have to start off with the two teams that certainly made a big splash over the weekend, and that being the Milwaukee Brewers. I'll start there, then I'll get to the Blue Jays and then the Yankees to kind of round this out. But for the Brewers, who went out to LA to play the Dodgers, and if you recall just a few weeks ago when LA went to Milwaukee and they were in the middle of a losing streak to where the Dodgers looked like they were going to exact some revenge here against a Brew crew that is trying to inch closer to the top of the NL Central, where the Cubs look like they're going to be in a battle royale throughout the rest of the summer to see who comes out on top and may have a series that they could claim their own at home in the wild card round. Well, the Brewers went in there, and I'm not going to say they spanked them, but they did a number on them to the tune of a sweep, not only over the weekend, but a season series sweep. Who would have thought that the Brewers had it in them to where they go to Chavez Ravine and they dust off the Dodgers, and now with that behind them and in a flat-footed tie for first place in the NL Central with the Cubs, now they have the sights set on bigger and better things. And what better way to get started by beating the Dodgers? And I don't know what to say. We could talk about the Dodgers and how they were unable to get a victory over the weekend, but I'm not worried about them in the grand scheme of things. And we've talked about the Dodgers plenty if you've listened to the podcast over the last several weeks. So as much as we could say, ooh, what happened to the Dodgers over the weekend? And Freddie Freeman now day-to-day, or so it seems, as he got hit by a pitch. So now his wrist is going to be a factor here. Who knows if that's going to be just a short-term nagging thing, or is it going to be a situation where it could prolong and could affect his swing to where he's not going to be that same hitter that he has been throughout the course of his career. Now, I understand it's a bit of a stretch, but you get my point when it comes to a Dodger team that right now it looks like they're going through the valley of a 162-game season to where who knows how much further it's going to go down. Now, again, I think they're going to be fine in the NL West, as I talked about ad infinitum. But the story here is the Brewers, because here's a team that traded away their closer last year, had that devastating playoff loss to the Mets in that Game 3 in the wild card, as we all know, Pete Alonso, the home run. And here it was, after losing a key piece, and even though they gotten back Brandon Woodruff, a guy that was a staple in their rotation for the last several years, and even though he came back with a big giant win against the Marlins of all teams, and who knows what his progress is going to be for the second half of the year. But I'm sure if you're a fan of the Brew Crew, you got to be ecstatic with what they've done here this year. Pat Murphy piggybacking off of his manager of the year in the National League last year. And the team has overachieved. And this is a young team with players like Jackson Chourio and Bryce Terang. And remember, Willie Adames left to go to San Francisco, so that was another key piece to their team. But they have not missed a beat. And I got to give it up for what they've been able to do. And Christian Yelich is a far cry from his MVP self in the late 20-teens, but he certainly has made his contributions. You have veterans like Rhys Hoskins. You have the young players, like I mentioned, the Chorios of the world, and guys like that. And their rotation, which is led by Freddie Peralta, very good pitcher, not really an ace, but he is the ace of this staff. And the back of their bullpen is led by Trevor McGill, the brother of Tyler McGill, who was an All-Star this year. And even though they said bye-bye to Devin Williams, that they didn't want to bring him back with whatever emotional baggage that he would have had going into the walk year of his contract, because remember, Devin Williams is a free agent after this year. Well, Trevor McGill has just filled his spot rather nicely. Now, come October, is going to be a different beast because we got to see him perform in high-pressure situations, and that we have not seen here. Now, he may have some along the way as they try to battle it out for a division where it could be up for grabs between them and the Cubs. But you got to like what you've seen here with the Brewers. And they've been, I will say they've been a surprise, despite the fact that they won the division last year and had a terrible playoff loss. But with some key pieces going elsewhere, and on top of that, just trying to piecemeal it together with players that they have in-house and not really going outside of the box to try to bring in that big-time free agent, which they don't really do, or make a big-time trade to bring in a big piece, which that's not really their MO. Obviously, they're a small market team, although they do have a lot of expectations considering what they've done, not only in the past couple of years, but even going back to when they first got Yelich, when they made a run in the postseason all the way to a Game 7 of the NLCS back in 2018 before losing to the Dodgers, if you recall. So the team has, or at least the organization, has some pedigree. And this team right now, with Pat Murphy at the helm, back-to-back years, very successful, and who knows where this is going to end up. But you got to give the Brewers their flowers. They've been more than what a lot of people could have expected this year, more so than last year. And I picked them as an under last year, and that was a bad choice on my part, but I picked them as an over this year, and right now, that's looking pretty good. So give it up for what the Brewers have done as they try to continue to make headway not only in the National League, but also in an NL Central that, as I mentioned, could be a battle and a fight to the very finish. And then you have the Toronto Blue Jays, who smoked the Giants over the weekend in in Toronto against the San Francisco Giants. And they show no signs of slowing down, considering that the next series that they have, and I'll talk about that in a moment, is going to be a big one, and one that they're going to have to really kind of peek to the left, peek to the right to make sure that the team doesn't come with the smackdown. And I'll explain in a second. But Toronto, since the early part of the month, when the Yankees came to town, and remember, they were 3 games behind the Yankees when they invaded T-Dot. And what did they do? They swept them. 4 games up at the Rogers Center where they overtook first place, and they haven't looked back since. And now they actually gained the game over the weekend from the Yankees because of the sweep. And even though the Yankees won 2 out of 3, and I'll touch on the Yanks in a second, but Toronto looks like a team that they're not ready to let go of the AL East at all. Forget about sooner, later, etc. But give it up for what they've done. And when you look at their team, obviously Vladimir Guerrero, the $500 million man, and George Springer looking like a guy who's healthy and is a leader, who has pedigree, won a championship with the Astros many moons ago. I understand you call them cheaters, whatever, but still, the guy's a big game player, especially in big spots, and you got to respect that from a guy who knows his way around winning. So it's Springer, and even with a rotation with the Jose Barrios of the world and the Kevin Gossmans and guys that I understand they may not knock your socks off, but they're still able to do the job. And as a team that right now has been in first place for a few weeks and looking to stay there, that is a team that could be dangerous. Now, Toronto, as we all know, they've underachieved a lot over the last couple of years. They actually fell shy of the postseason the one year. No, it wasn't last year. 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, they lost to Toronto, if you remember, in the wild card round. Then they lost to the Twins, if you recall, in the wild card round as well. And then last year fell short. So now maybe this is their time to shine, considering that they're going to be in the running for division, at least so we think, considering they're the front runner right now in the AL East. But now they certainly got off on a good foot against a Giant team that has been stumbling, bumbling, fumbling. They now lost 5 in a row, considering they lost the last 2 to LA before the break, and now they've lost 3 in a row coming out of the break. But the Giants, we know their game in an NL that they're going to do whatever it takes to get into the postseason based on the moves that they've made, the Rafael Devers of the world and guys like that. But give it up. Toronto has certainly done exceptional, and they're going to try to continue to do so with their next series on the horizon, which, again, suspense, drum roll, I'll get to in a moment. But the next theme are the Yankees, and boy, did they salvage their weekend in a big fashion. On Friday night, they got embarrassed on the base paths there, where Ronald Acuna Jr. threw out a runner on third on a throw that did not have a bounce. It was airmailed 301 feet, and I believe they got, what was his kid's name? Yorbert Vivas out at third where he didn't even slide. Yankees were down 7-0, and they ended up losing 7-3. And then Saturday night, they were down 5-0 before you could blink, where you had Michael Harris Jr., or the second, the third, whatever it may be. Michael Harris, the center fielder, hit a 2-run homer, and then Ozzie Albies hit a 3-run homer, and then you're looking, oh, geez, this is going to be another wasted night if you're a fan of the Bombers. But then down 5-0 and down 7-2 going into the sixth inning, and then they just ran the table. They ran the Brave pitching staff and their bullpen out to dry. Raisel Iglesias, which I know he could be a guy that could be traded, and who knows, maybe the Braves will trade him for a bag of baseballs at this point. But the Yankees came back in a big flurry. They ended up winning 12-9 there on Saturday, and then Aaron Judge starts the game, doesn't lead off the game, but in the first inning hits a home run there for the Yankees to win 4-2, and they had a big offensive outburst there in the Saturday game, and then yesterday they were able to secure the series and win 2-1, where it certainly could have been a situation where they looked like they were on the verge of losing their Saturday night and would have went into yesterday's game possibly being swept, but that didn't happen. So the Yankees did save face, and they did win 2 out of 3, which was huge because they had to keep pace with the Blue Jays, who, as we talked about, have not lost coming out of the break. And now it sets it up for, before I get to the other particulars over the weekend, but it sets us up for the series of the week. And we'll take a look at the schedule at the end of the baseball segment. But you have to look at, right now, Yankees, Blue Jays in Toronto over the next 3 days, and I believe that starts tonight. Let me be perfectly fine on that, because next thing you know, they'll start tomorrow, and then I'm going to look like an idiot. But as I pull up, no, that's not it. Of course, I don't have my baseball schedule here. But I believe it's going to start tonight, where the Yankees, let's see if they're going to return the favor of what the Blue Jays did to the Yankees. What is it now? 3 weeks ago today. Let me think if I do the math correctly. Yes, it'll be 3 weeks ago today when the Yankees started that 4-game series on a Monday. And what happened? Got swept, as you know. So as I take a look at the schedule, Yankees in Toronto tonight, and it's just a 3-game series. And Carlos Rodon, this is an enormous start for him. Rodon, who has been up and down, in and out as of late, and he's going to have to put forth a big-time performance here tonight. That's all there is to it. And he's going to go up against Kevin Gausman, so a very good pitching matchup there to begin this series. And listen, grand scheme of things, I think if the Yankees win 2, you want to gain a game here. You do not want to lose 2 out of 3 and fall another game back. Could the Yankees sweep? I think it's going to be predicated on this game tonight, because if Rodon goes out and pitches 7 innings of 1-run, 3-hit, 9-strikeout ball to where the Yankees win convincingly. They don't have to dominate 11-1, but if they win 5-1, 6-1, I think that's going to bode well for them to possibly see if they can run the table. Now, they're going to have Max Scherzer tomorrow for the Blue Jays go up against Cam Schlittler, who's a guy that could be on the trading block, whether that means to go to Arizona to bring back Eugenio Suarez and even Zach Gallen for that matter. So who knows? This could be a showcase moment for Schlittler. And then on Wednesday, the finale, Max Fried, who remember is coming off of that blister. So we got to see how he's going to fare and his start against Chris Bassett. So you have very good pitching matchups in Toronto, and Fried will be a big-time spotlight on him to see whether or not that blister is 100%. Because remember, that blister popped up there the start after the Mets series. And when was that start after the Mets series? Because that was the 4th of July weekend. That was the 6th. And then they played the weekend before where they lost 2 out of 3. Who did the Yankees play to close out the weekend? It'll come to me. So he'll have a significant amount of time for that blister to heal. So we're going to have to wait and see what's going to happen there. Listen, I like Toronto to win 2 out of 3 here. I would not be surprised if the Yankees win 2 out of 3. I'd probably be a bit surprised if they sweep. And who knows? Maybe they short memories and knowing that it wasn't that long ago that the Yankees got embarrassed up there to where the Blue Jays just swept them out of the Rogers Center and back to the States. So let's see. I'm going to be wired to the series to see what's going to transpire. And if the Blue Jays really want to make a statement, win 2 out of 3. They don't have to sweep again. If they sweep again, that would really, you talk about, they would have the whole major leagues on notice to know if they're going to do that to the Yankees back-to-back and sweep them 7 straight games over the course of 3 weeks. So keep that in mind as we move it along. And you know I'm going to be on top of that series when we get to Thursday's podcast. I'm sure that's going to be the main thing that I'll talk about right out of the gate. And as far as what else is happening in baseball over the weekend, I know Tarek Skubal had another great start last night. Another 1-run, 3-hit, 10 strikeout performance as they beat the Rangers in Texas, as the Tigers will now move it along and they'll play the Pirates here in the early part of the week. And as far as anything else with baseball that is of note to really sink our teeth into, we have the deadline now 10 days away, where on the 31st at 6 p.m., nothing has really happened as of yet as far as anything juicy or anything with the rumor mill. I know the Yankees may be hot on the trail for, as I mentioned, Suarez and maybe Zach Gallen. Now, who they give up is going to be big to see what's going to happen there. Will the Diamondbacks even think to say, hey, we want Spencer Jones to come back, and he's lighting it up right now to where he's in AAA, the left-handed slugger, where a lot of people think he's a left-handed Aaron Judge. So if I'm the Diamondbacks, that's the guy I'm going to target first and foremost, and maybe bring back Cam Schlittler in the process. So let's see if the Diamondbacks are going to wheel and deal in that regard, or more so the Yankees, because if they're going to try to bring back the third baseman and a pitcher, they're going to have to give up something, and both of those guys are in their walk year of the contract, so we'll see what will take place there. But as far as anything else that's newsworthy or noteworthy from the weekend, I know that the Mariners took 2 out of 3 from Houston, so that was a good sign because at least they gained the game. But Houston, we would think they're going to be fine for the division when it's all said and done. Other than that, the Phillies lose 2 out of 3 to the Angels, and now the Angels come up the Northeast Corridor to play the Mets at Citi Field over the next 3 days, starting today for sure. So the Phillies will have a half-game lead over the Mets right now in the division. Again, kind of hot potato. They're not separating themselves as the Mets lost 2 out of 3, as you know, and the Phillies did lose 2 out of 3 as well to the Angels, who are trying to hang in there, and give them credit for Anaheim. I was going to say Los Angeles Angels. It was all mixed up in my head at the moment. But for Anaheim to see whether or not that they're going to be a player here with the trade deadline coming, I don't think so, but they're hanging in there. I got to give them credit. Not that I expect it to last into August and September, but we shall see. As far as the Cubs and Red Sox, I know that was a nostalgic series over the weekend where the Cubs won 2 out of 3, but the Red Sox did salvage the series there yesterday out at Wrigley. And besides that, that's it. Mets lost 2 out of 3 to the Reds. They won yesterday. I know you had the scenario with Pete Alonso, who did not start the game, and he has a hand that needed some work. The x-rays were negative. And for him to come into the game yesterday and has hit a bit of a slump where he has not hit well prior to the All-Star break and now even coming out of the break. So let's see Alonso, even with a pseudo day off with the Angels coming to town, let's see if he could get his bat ready and get himself back to where he was, maybe not at the beginning of the year when he was batting in the 350s, but at least to be respectable in order for him to wreak some havoc in that lineup. So we'll see what's going to happen there. Then you had the Cardinals get swept by the Diamondbacks, and maybe now the Diamondbacks have gotten their equilibrium. They're at 500 right now. The Cardinals are now falling back from the NL Central pack as far as the division goes, although they're still in the wild card mix. But I think you can forget about them for the division. But Arizona, let's see what they got, as now they, think about this. The Cardinals, I believe, but prior to the start of that series, they had a 4-game lead where the Cardinals were 3.5 back of the 6th place finisher in the NL wildcard race. And they're still 3.5 back, but the Cardinals were, if I had it mixed up with the Diamondbacks. Cardinals 3.5 back before the weekend, and the Diamondbacks were 7.5 back. Well, now the Diamondbacks are 4.5 back of the wild card based on the sweep over the Redbirds. So something to keep in mind here to see if they have some gas in the tank and whether or not Arizona's going to go on a little bit of a run. So we'll keep in mind on that. But other than that, that's what you have there with the baseball. Nothing else to really chew on. But as far as the schedule here, the early part of the week, you have, Baltimore, Cleveland. Boston and Philly, decent series there. Cincinnati, Washington after leaving New York. Obviously, the series of the week so far, the early part is going to be Yankees, Blue Jays. San Francisco's at Atlanta. Kansas City at Chicago. St. Louis at Colorado. So they can snap that losing streak in a hurry by beating the Rockies. Houston at Arizona. Very good series there. AL, NL. So let's see if Arizona could continue their good fortune. Milwaukee at Seattle. Decent series. And Minnesota at LA, the Twins, which obviously maybe the Dodgers will get back in their winning ways. So you have a couple of good series there to chew on. And as far as the standings go, we know what's happening with the NL West, AL West, and AL Central. And we know what's happening in the NL East with the Phillies and Mets. Same for the Central with Cubs and Brewers, flat-footed tie. Reds and Cardinals are way behind. You can forget about them. Padres, who won 2 out of 3 in Washington over the weekend, but they still are a ways back from the Dodgers. And in fact, what are they? No, they're 3 and a loss. When I said ways back, I took it the Giants because they're 6 back now. 3.5, 3 and a loss, but still, I'm not going to get crazy about the Dodgers now in this free fall. Call me back when the Padres are 1 back, a half game back, or tied at the top. And even then, I still wouldn't be shaking in my boots if I'm a Dodger fan. And as far as the wild card goes, the American League has the Rays 1 in the loss, but a game and a half behind the Red Sox for the last playoff spot in the wild card race. Then you have the Rangers 3.5, Angels 4, Guardians 4.5. Twins 5, I know Royals 5.5. I mean, listen, I guess I got to throw them in because they're 5 and 5.5 back, but they're 3 and 4 games under 500 respectively, and that is the Guardians and Twins. Or excuse me, that is the Twins and Royals, and the Guardians are 2 games under 500. So I have to throw them in the mix because they are within striking distance, and they are a 4 or 5 game winning streak from getting that much closer. So I'll give it up for them. And as far as the National League goes, Giants are 3 and a loss, 2.5 behind the Padres for the final playoff spot in the National League. Then you have the Reds, also tied with the Giants, same record, 2.5 back of the Padres. Cardinals 3.5, Diamondbacks, as we talked about, 4.5, and that covers it. Because then the Marlins 7.5, but I'm not even going to include them because they're 6 under. Although they've been playing well, I got to give it up for the Marlins. In fact, their road record is better than their home record, which I looked at, which I was surprised because their home record, I think they're 22 and 30, but they're on the road, they're 24 and 24. So listen, I don't expect the Marlins to be there, but I only bring them up because you see 7.5 back, and I'm like, oh, all right, well, the Diamondbacks were just 7.5 back, and now they gained 3 games on the Cards. So that's what you have with the baseball. Now, as I get out of the batter's box and get to the first tee, let's talk about the Open Championship because I'm going to turn my attention to golf. And there's a lot to talk about, but in essence, there's not a lot to talk about. There's a lot to talk about because when it comes to Scottie Scheffler, he is doing things right now on the golf course that, and this may be a shocker, so if you're driving, make sure you go slow, or if you just sat down at your dinner table getting ready to eat while you're listening to me, make sure you sit with ease, or if you're on the treadmill or running in the street, make sure you proceed with caution, because what Scottie Scheffler is doing right now is Tiger-esque. No, he's not Tiger Woods, people. No, I'm not saying that he's as good or playing as better than Tiger Woods in any stretch of his career. I'm not going to say that, but he is Tiger-esque because not only is he the number 1 player in the world, no shock there, he is playing like that and then some. Not only does he win the Open Championship, and the worst he shot over the weekend was a 68. He is one of 4 golfers in the Open era to shoot 68 or less in all 4 rounds. And that also includes Colin Morikawa, Jesper Parnevik, that's dating back to, I think, 1994, if you go back that far, and Henrik Stenson. Those other 3 golfers shot 68 or less in the Open era, and now you got to include Scottie Scheffler's name. And also, when Scottie Scheffler has a lead going into Sunday, and not only in a major, but just any tournament, he's 11-0. He doesn't give it up. He doesn't relinquish his leads. And similar to Tiger on Sunday, when he wears the red, everybody else is shaking in their boots because they know they have no shot. And Scottie Scheffler is playing on that type of level. So before people start saying, whoa, JAYREELZ, how can you compare him to Tiger Woods? Whoa, JAYREELZ, there's no way he's Tiger-esque. Whoa, that is blasphemous. Whoa, that is sacrilege. Whoa, that's over the top. No, it is not. Scheffler is on a roll, and there is no slowing down. Now, for him, unfortunately, the golf season, when it comes to the majors, is already done. So he's going to have to wait till April of next year. Count the months. He's going to wait forever in order for him to get on a golf course to play for a major again. Now, we understand there are plenty of tournaments, and I know we have the Ryder Cup, which I would assume off the top of my head he's got to be a part of. Because if he's not, there needs to be an investigation, which I think he is. That's at the end of September. But for Scheffler, the guy is unstoppable. He has won a zillion tournaments. He's won 2 of the last 3 majors. Remember, he won the PGA back in May, and now he wins the Open, and there is no ifs, ands, buts, maybes about it. Even Rory McIlroy said that, there's nobody better than this guy right now. Bow down to Scottie Scheffler. And based on what you saw over the weekend, now this is where I get to the non-fun part, where there was no drama, whether there was any intrigue to be found nowhere near the course at Royal Portrush. And here it was in a nutshell. Yes, you had Matt Fitzpatrick. Yes, you had Hae-Tong Lee, who played very well throughout this tournament. Yes, you had Bryson DeChambeau rise from the dead. He shot a 78 on the first day, and then he shot a 65 on the next day, and actually got into the top 10. But that still wasn't even close to get to Scottie Scheffler. And even Rory, who was 7 strokes behind the leader in one Scottie Scheffler, and even he played well to the tune where he shot 10 under for the tournament. But he was still 7 strokes behind Scottie Scheffler. That's how brilliant he was throughout the weekend. And he shot wonderfully on Friday, and that's where it really shifted because he had 8 birdies, and he shot a 64 there, which was just phenomenal. And then he was on the top of the leaderboard and then was 4 strokes over going into the final round there yesterday. And then he had a 7-stroke lead at one point yesterday in that final round. And again, no suspense, no biting of the fingernails, no white knuckler down to the nubs of your fingernails, where it was far from what we saw at the Masters with Justin Rose and Rory McIlroy. I mean, this was an absolute cakewalk. And this was absolute surgery that Scottie Scheffler did on that course against his opponents and left a wake of guys who shot well over the weekend, as I mentioned. Even guys like Chris Gotterup. I mean, he was a guy that wasn't on my radar. I couldn't even tell you who he was if he fell on me. But when you have Scheffler playing from in front and just dominating pretty much from start to finish, and again, he shot a 68 on the first day, and he wasn't at the top of the leaderboard, even anywhere near that. But because 64 there, which was the big one there on Friday with the 8 birdies, and then he shot a 67 on Saturday and topped it off with a 68. I mean, there is no one on the planet that could do what Scottie Scheffler's doing right now. There isn't. And it's not to say that on any given day, a Jon Rahm, where he's been invisible in these majors over the last couple of years, or Rory McIlroy for what he's done, Wyndham Clark also, I know he had that little hiccup there along the way where, I guess shouldn't have done, but he will get a pass. But even Wyndham Clark, who shot 11 under, I believe, when it was all said and done, and Harris Inglis and guys like that who played well. And another one, Xander Schauffele, was excellent. And DeChambeau, who, one more time, rose from the ashes. But with all those storylines and all those players who, think about this, if Scheffler wasn't playing, and let's say Harris Inglis was your winner, you would have had some drama. Because Inglis was 1 stroke better than Goddard, was 2 strokes better than Clark, Fitzpatrick, and Lee, and was 3 strokes better than McIntyre, Schauffele, and McIlroy. And DeChambeau was 9 under for the tournament. So it was very competitive after Scottie Scheffler. But that's why this Open Championship was a snooze, was a bore. You just yawned your way through it just to make sure it was going to be official that Scheffler was able to hold the claret jug over his head. And obviously did so in simple, easy, precise, and just surgical fashion. So congratulations, Scottie Scheffler. You're the man. 2 of the last 3 tournaments, and now even more so for Scottie Scheffler. There's no more talk about him not being able to win another major. Because remember, coming into this year, he won the Masters last year. He won the Masters in 2022. Those are the only 2 major tournaments he's won. Now, he's won a lot of other tournaments that aren't the 4 majors, whether it be at the start of the year, which would lead into the Masters, where he has been very successful and certainly got off to his golf year in a tremendous way. And even though, whether it was the PGA, the US Open, or even the Open Championship, he would do well, but obviously would not be a champion. And that was a lot of the chatter after the Masters, going into the PGA, where are we going to see Scottie Scheffler win a major other than the Masters? And what did he do? He won the PGA here this past May. And although did not fare well at the US Open in Oakmont, but now here he is, rising to the occasion again to where he wins another major. And now he's just 1 Grand Slam away, that being the US Open, for a career Grand Slam. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of pressure for him to win that US Open next year. We don't have to worry about that till next June. But now he's got 3 of the Grand Slams in his back pocket. And there's going to be a lot of idle time between majors to see whether or not he's going to be able to pick up where he left off, how he closed out this year. I understand a lot of time to chew on, a lot of time to think about, but now the pressure is off of him not being able to win a major outside of Augusta. He's done that. He's shown that. He's proved that. And has done it with flying colors. The talk next year, especially when you get to Father's Day weekend, is whether or not he's going to win that US Open for him to get that career Grand Slam. That's for then. Something to bring up now, just to keep in your mental Rolodex, and obviously keep that receipt for later on down the road. But Scottie Scheffler, I mean, there isn't anything else more that you could say about his performance, about what he's done, about 11 straight going into the final round as him being at the top of the leaderboard, 11-0, cruising to victory, 2nd title as far as the Grand Slam in the last 3. Kudos to you, my man. Congrats, and you're at the top of your game more so than anybody that's out there right now. All right, now let me turn my attention to what is happening with, you know what? Let me get to the NFL now because there's a few things I want to chew on. NBA and the NHL, not so much. And then I want to get to the UFC and even boxing for that matter before I close out. But the NFL, I'm going to start with TJ Watt as I put on my helmet and shoulder pads. Now, TJ Watt, everybody knows I'm a huge Steeler fan. Die hard, going back 50 years almost. So he gets his deal. He was holding out, didn't attend the mandatory mini camps, said, I want to get paid like Myles Garrett, who got over $40 million, got the big time guaranteed money, etc. I deserve that type of loot. Well, the Steelers, who, for whatever the reason, over the last few years, and if you haven't checked on my YouTube channel at JAYREELZ, a couple of weeks ago, I put up a commentary video talking about who the hell do the Pittsburgh Steelers think they are. And it encompassed this 3-year window of the Steelers all of a sudden looking like riverboat gamblers, that they've taken chances, that they've paid people big time money, not just their own players, but trading to bring in guys onto their team and then paying them big bucks, i.e. DK Metcalf. So now, as I've said all that, and I hope you get the chance to watch that, it's one of my biggest watched videos on my channel, period. So please do so and subscribe in the process. But as far as TJ Watt, 3 years, $123 million, whatever it is, $102 million guaranteed. All right, fine. Does he deserve that money? Based on his resume, yes. But now, and this is the problem when you have a player who's on the back nine of his career. Let's face it, he is. He's 31 years of age. He's probably at hole 10 or 11 right now. So it's not as if he's at the 16th hole. But this contract that he got was because of his past performance. This is not for what he's going to do this year and beyond. So we need to see the TJ Watt that's going to wreck games and get double-digit sacks in the upper teens to maybe even 20. Because the 11 and a half that he got last year, all right, and that's respectable. But that's not all-pro first-team level. For him to get that and really earn that money, and that's not to say he's not worthy of it or he's not capable of it. But if you're going to make that money that you held out of training camp and held out of mini camp, well, training camp hasn't started. It starts, in fact, I believe it starts Wednesday. So he has not held out of training camp, so that's my error, my apologies. But he did hold out of mandatory mini camp and said, I'm not showing up. All right, you got the bag. Now, let's see you wreck these games. That's all I got to say. Because another 11 and a half sack year is not going to cut it if the Steelers, with everything they've done this offseason and trying to not only get to the playoffs again, but win a round for the first time in forever and maybe beyond, he's going to be front and center as a big reason why they're going to do that. And yes, I need to see first team all NFL pro level. That's it. I don't want to see 11 and a half sacks. I don't want to hear, well, I didn't have Alex Highsmith on the other side. He was out for 5 games. Nonsense. Oh, I got doubled and triple teamed all year. So what? You got to find a way. Guys have been doubled and triple teamed before, and they still find a way to get to a quarterback. The Aaron Donalds of the world. Guys like that. And obviously, you're the biggest, have the biggest contract other than a quarterback in the history of the sport. Well, guess what, TJ? You're my man. But now you really have to show why they paid you all that money. And no, not for 2 sacks against the Jacksonville Jaguars or not for 3 sacks against the lowly Las Vegas Raiders or week 1 against the Jets. No, I want to see 3.5 sacks against the Baltimore Ravens. I want to see 2.5 sacks against the Cincinnati Bengals. I want to see big-time sacks against teams that are obviously going to be fighting for playoff positioning. And then once you get there, I want to see you wrecking games. That's it. Let me move on. This situation regarding Lloyd Howell, and I understand there's not a lot of people who know who Lloyd Howell is if they fell on him. But Lloyd Howell was the guy who took over for DeMaurice Smith, who was the head of the NFL Players Association when it comes to negotiating CBAs and being the guy that the players are going to turn to lead them in the right way when it comes to negotiating at the table with the owners and Roger Goodell, etc. And Howell, who had been there for 2 years, and a lot of people didn't know who he was. Everybody knew who DeMaurice Smith was and had his tenure, which obviously came to an unceremonious ending, which I won't get into right now. Not that he did anything bad. But when you want to talk about unceremonious endings, nothing's going to top what Lloyd Howell did. Because here's a guy who took over 2 years ago and then all of a sudden resigned in the middle of the night where you looked around and said, what? Wait, what? What happened? So here's a guy that has been investigated by the feds, and you have guys like Pablo Torre, who's done phenomenal jobs, whether it's trying to dig up dirt on Bill Belichick, among other things that he's done, and trying to put forth responsible journalism, which kind of seems to fall by the wayside here in 2025, where everybody wants to put up the clickbait videos, and I have some critique videos coming down the pike, so stay tuned to the YouTube channel, people. at JAYREELZ. If you know, now you know. Or if you don't know, now you know. But we have all this stuff that's come out and alleged, but there has to be some truth to it, considering that Lloyd Howell resigned on his own accord, because this optic of him dealing with a couple of firms behind the scenes when it comes to money, maybe being under the table, when it comes to stuff with the players. Now, I don't have all the details when it comes to that, but let's just say that they were dubious to know that whatever it is that he was doing behind the scenes certainly was, I'll be nice when I say this, certainly wasn't acceptable. Let's just put it that way. And to make matters worse, whatever these shady dealings were, and it hasn't been chronicled as exactly what it was, but there's been one set of circumstances that is really mind-blowing and has been brought out here in the last 48 hours to where he had a car service. Get ready for this, people. It gets better. He had a car service waiting for him as he landed in Fort Lauderdale sometime, I think, in 2023, pretty much when he just got the job, where he got picked up and was dropped off, I believe, at Tootsie's Cabaret, which is a very popular strip club in the, I believe it's Miami Gardens or somewhere in North Miami, to where he had the chauffeur sit out 7 hours to wait for him. And then I don't know if he left with clients, quote unquote. And here he is getting car service to where he's being billed $738 for, and having nights on the town, and who knows, probably using the corporate card on lap dances and things of that nature. And yes, I'll sprinkle allegedly on that, but there have been reports of dollar amounts being spent on car service because he's waiting outside strip clubs for hours at a time, because he's indoors having the time of his life, where instead of having the guy go, leave, and then come back at 4 in the morning, he has him sit outside and wait. Very strange, isn't it? From an executive who obviously has to overlook 700, or not even 700, I'm thinking baseball, over 1,500 players throughout his sport. And this is how he's going to go out. And this is where it even gets worse, to where the person underneath him, J.C. Treader, who looked like he was going to be the heir apparent, he resigned as well. He came out and said, well, all that's going on with me and what's happened here over the last few months, and who knows, maybe he has blood on his hands too. And let me see if I can pull up a quote. J.C. Treader resigns. Looked like he was going to be the heir apparent, as I mentioned. He said he wanted no part to play the interim exec of the Players Association. And his quote was that he had nothing left to give when it comes to that. Well, maybe he knew about this stuff. I don't want to say he participated or was elbow to elbow with Howell in some of these proceedings, whether it is with these firms trying to work out under the table deals or at these strip clubs where he was making it rain. I mean, I don't know, but Treader said, I don't want any part of this. I am done. Give it to somebody else, which makes you think not only was Lloyd Howell doing some real dirty stuff, but maybe stuff that we still don't know or we're privy to that may be coming out in the light in the days and weeks to come. And I don't know how Roger Goodell and company are going to try to shift or twist or whatever, but right now this is a terrible optic for the league. And I understand if you're watching on Spotify or YouTube, as I put up the two fingers, almost like the U, University of Miami, but no, this is also the shield. Because the impenetrable one that the NFL is, they'll do their best to try to sweep this under the rug. They'll put somebody in place, I would think, in the next day or so, and away we go. But, man, Lloyd Howell, you've done yourself, the Players Association, not the players itself, but to be the guy that's going to lead the players, you've done them dirty. And, boy, the next person that comes in, they're going to have to clean up this mess. Ugh. That is a terrible optic, if you ask me, for the league. No matter how they want to slice it, no matter how they want to cut it, to me, if you ask yours truly, that is one that the NFL, I'm sure, when they opened up their papers and they took their first sip of their espresso or their cappuccino with their little cinnamon roll or their blueberry muffin, boy, that sucker got spit out across the room. So I don't want to hear it. If the NFL is going to just poo-poo this and be like, oh, this is nothing. Oh, we'll get another person in place. Oh, we know about what happened, but no, we got to... No. One more time, people. This is a punch to that shield. It may be a little ding, but it's a ding nevertheless. Now, as far as some signings and retirements, I know Mike Williams retired after 8 years. The longtime Charger receiver also was with the Jets and Steelers last year. 30 years of age, decided to call it a career. Kudos to you, my man. Whatever it is that you do in the next stage of your life, all the best to you. Then you have the Chiefs sign George Karlaftis, 4 years, $93 million. Of course, X amount guaranteed on top of what they gave Trey Smith, the guard, to make him the highest paid guard in league history. So they keep their team intact, especially the defense there, because Karlaftis is a very good defensive end, as you know. The Seahawks relief, Noah Fant, the tight end, who's a very good player, so I'm sure somebody will pick him up. Rashee Rice, speaking of Chiefs, is going to serve 30 days of jail time. Remember that pileup last year, I believe it was in Dallas, where he drove his Lambo 117 miles an hour, and it was a big giant pileup. And he not only has to serve that jail time, but also has 5 years probation, but he could serve that 30-day sentence anytime over the next 5 years. Who knows if he's going to do that next offseason or whatever. You think it'd be better off if he would do that next offseason with training camp literally within a day or two right on the horizon. So he's got that to deal with down the road, and let's see as he tries to mend his image, and especially with the teammates and all that, where obviously he has to repair that. And I'm sure he's apologized and said all the right things, which he did, but more so to the guys in the locker room than even outside of that. So I had to throw that in there. And then the Saints signed Tyler Shuck, the second-round pick, to a $10 million guaranteed contract. Second round, guaranteed. That just goes to show you that they have to put all their chips in the middle of the table for that guy, because the Saint quarterback right now, the position is pretty much up for grabs with he and I believe Spencer Rattler. So let's see what's going to happen with the Saints as they fight it out to see who's going to be under center for week 1. And the Eagles, you see those rings? I mean, these Super Bowl rings, what's going to happen next? I think their Super Bowl rings, they're going to fly away. Because if you didn't watch, I'm sure if you go to their website or their Twitter account, whatever, they have obviously diamonds everywhere, and I believe they're emeralds, the green, but they actually have wings that pop out of the Super Bowl ring. And I'm not kidding when I say that. They pop out. So what's going to happen next? Let's say, I know the Jet fans are going to cringe when I say this. Let's say the Jets win the Super Bowl this year. What's going to happen? You're going to open up the ring and a plane's going to fly out? Or if the Broncos win the Super Bowl, there's going to be a Bronco that's going to gallop out of the ring? I mean, what is happening here? These Super Bowl rings, which are the size of a golf ball, now they're going to have all types of whatever it is. You may have pyrotechnic coming out of it, sparks and flames. I mean, what is going on here with these rings? They just outdo last year, and they outdo the year before that. I mean, see that? I mean, I don't even know what else to say. I mean, I saw that, and I was just appalled. Because the next thing, whomever wins next year, is going to even be worse, and is going to top what the Super Bowl rings of this year is for the Eagles. And then I'm only bringing this up because it's sports-related. But do we really have to hear from the president about him saying that the Washington Commanders and even the Cleveland Guardians have to change their names? Doesn't he have bigger things to worry about? Doesn't he have other things that are on his plate more so than these teams? And I get it that the Commanders are in their backyard, obviously in D.C., and with a lot of the talk about the area where RFK stands to this day, they haven't knocked it down, but with the, I believe it's been passed that a new stadium could be built on that site for the Commanders, but now he's trying to flex his muscles to say, oh, well, if they're going to want a stadium there, they're going to have to change their name to the old name as we know what they were. And I'll do whatever it takes for them to change their name back to the old name, where the owner, Josh Harris, says, no, we're not going to do that. And listen, the NFL is powerful enough that I'm sure that whatever the president has to say about that is going to fall on deaf ears, because the NFL, as we all know, has a lot more money than what the current administration is going to put forth to try to stop the Commanders from going across from Landover to the District of Columbia. So, again, don't you have other things to worry about? More so than what's happening with the sports teams and their names? Seriously? And that's all I'll say there. That has nothing to do with me being left, right, sideways, up, way, down. No. Nothing. If you've listened to me before, I'm down the middle. And that goes for anybody. Biden could have talked about this. I don't care who. You could bring George Washington from the dead. And if he came out and said, oh, we're not going to give the Commanders their stadium unless they change it back to their former name. And no, not the Washington football team, the name before that. Nonsense. I say, George Washington, stay in your lane. Shut up. You don't need to talk about sports. Worry about what's happening in the country first and foremost. Because, please, nobody wants to hear from you when it talks about him trying to go back to the old name. So this isn't a thing about who's in office right now. That could be for all the other 46 presidents before him. And I would say the same thing to them and to their faces. So I don't want to hear people, oh, he's on this tip where he probably doesn't like it. No. Zip it. All right, now let me take off the helmet and shoulder pads. Let me see what I got here before I wrap up. NBA, lace up the high tops. Damian Lillard going back to Portland. Listen, that is a good thing. We understand he's probably not going to play next year. And he goes back on a very team-friendly deal. 3 years, $42 million. Who knows what type of player he's going to be. And obviously he's in his mid-30s. But knowing that he goes back home and maybe whatever it is that he could contribute, more so from a leadership standpoint and what he means to that organization. Obviously his number's going to get raised to the rafters one day. And I'm sure he's probably going to have a job in the front office at some point when his career is finally over. But let's see what Lillard could do. Hopefully by the time he comes back, maybe they could put this team together. And I get it. It's a loaded Western Conference. So not that you could expect a lot as far as them maybe being a team that can make some noise with the OKCs, with the Denvers, with the Clippers, which I'll get to in a second, with the T-Wolves, with all the teams that are playing out there, which obviously it's a formidable bunch. But you do like that he's going to go back and not ring chase or go to a team where he's not really going to be too comfortable. And his tenure in Milwaukee, let's face it, wasn't what I thought and maybe a lot of people thought was going to be a match made in heaven, because he's going to play with Giannis. He's going to obviously shoot from the logo. It's going to be a great tandem. And it was anything but. Yeah, it had its moments, had its flashes, but it's certainly, this experiment over 2 years certainly did not turn out to be what a lot of people thought, including yours truly. So good for him going back. Then you have Marcus Smart, who looks like he's going to get bought out by the Wizards and join the Lakers on a 2-year, $11 million deal. Now, Marcus Smart, is he going to be anything close to what he's resembled during his days in Boston, especially just, 3 years ago when he was the Defensive Player of the Year? Now, we know he can still defend. We know he's still tenacious. We know he's still a glue player that you want to and like to have on your team. But how effective he's going to be, he's nursed a lot of injuries over the years. Obviously, a lot of miles on that odometer. So, yes, he's going to go on a team that even Luka Doncic reached out to him to say, hey, what would you think about coming to LA to be that guy who can lock down the opposing guard or the opposing small forward player on that team? And I'm sure, hey, if Luka's going to call and have a chance to play with LeBron for a year, why not? And he has a 2-year deal, I think $11 million. But how effective is he going to be? That remains to be seen, and how healthy. Because he's been in and out of the lineup, even his days in Boston. Because he is that hard-nosed, rugged player where he's going to dive on the floor, get those 50-50 balls, those tips that are in the air, where he's going to bang bodies and obviously throw his body at will to make a play. And with all those bumps and bruises over the years, it's taken its toll. So I think it's a good signing, But how good is it going to be for them going to next year, especially after you get past the first 20 games and beyond, where health has been an issue for him? That's a big question mark. So we'll see what's going to happen there. And then the Clippers are considering a reunion, a remarriage of sorts with the one CP3 Chris Paul. I mean, you're making this team out to be the all-geriatric team, where you have James Harden in his mid-30s. Kawhi, I believe, he's pushing his mid-30s, maybe 32, 33. But we know all the injuries that he sustained over the years. You're bringing Bradley Beal, and we know what he brings to the table too. When healthy and his head screwed on straight, you have an all-star caliber player, but take those two things out of the equation, and you're going to have a situation where he's going to be out of the lineup, or when he's in the lineup, he's not going to be as effective, he's not going to shoot well. It's going to be a disaster. And now you bring in Chris Paul, who's 40 years of age, 20 years in the league. Yes, he still could manufacture some moments and some situations, and not a lot is going to be expected out of him. You're not expecting 19 and 9 every game, but you are going to want to try to get something out of him, knowing that the Clippers are going to try to make a run and try to see if they could get deep into the playoffs to places that they've never been to, only one time to a conference final, and that was when Chris Paul was in Phoenix against LA, if you recall, in that conference final when Phoenix went to the NBA final in that 2020-2021 season. So who knows? Does he go back to LA for one last go-around? Not official, but we'll have to wait and see on that. But that's what's happening in the NBA. And I know the WNBA had their All-Star game this weekend. What was it? Team Collier versus Team Clark. And I know Clark has been the subject of a lot of controversy with the injuries and being out of the lineup and just a lightning rod for stuff, which I know I said I was going to follow a lot more and I haven't. But I know it's tough because I don't have a team to root for. I don't have that rooting interest. And people say, what about the Liberty JAYREELZ? They just won a final last year. That's a team you can rally around. Well, I'm not a bandwagon guy. I'm not, well, hey, I'm going to jump on the Liberty. No, but I know I've done a terrible job. I know I said after last year I was going to do a much better job with the W this year, and I have not. Yeah, I talked about it in the opening weekend and what happened there, where the Liberty got their rings, and obviously they got off to a great start. I believe they were 9-0 before they lost to the Fever. I think that was their first loss that they suffered when Clark came back from that hamstring injury. I believe she had a hammy injury. So, yeah, I know I need to talk more about the W, but hopefully moving forward I could do so, especially as we get deeper and closer to their playoffs, which is, I believe is in September. So that's what we got with the basketball. Lacing up the skates with the hockey real quick. Winnipeg, they signed Gabriel Velarde, 6-year, $45 million deal. Now remember, Nikolai Ehlers, their big-time player here over the last few years, signed with Carolina. So not to say that makes up for it. And, of course, he was on the Jet team last year and had a big year for that matter. But I don't know if he's going to come anything close to matching what Ehlers does. But for Winnipeg, at least they re-signed one of their own. And then you had a retirement where Yaroslav Halak, the longtime goaltender, played 17 years, bunch of teams. Most notably, Montreal also played with the Caps. Had a decent stint there with the Islanders many moons ago, but then also bounced around with the Blues and the Bruins and the Rangers, and hadn't played over the last 2 years. In fact, was 5 wins short of 300, so had a very good career, long career. Congratulations to you, and all the best to your second career or second journey outside of hockey. So we'll see what goes on with him there. And then lastly, as I take off the skates and put on my fighting gloves, and this is a two-pronged attack because I didn't talk about Manny Pacquiao, and I'll talk about him afterwards. But the Max Holloway, Dustin Poirier fight on Saturday night did not disappoint. That was a battle to the end, but Max Holloway, won the war. And funny enough, because remember, in the first two go-arounds, Poirier won first round submission and then a 5-round unanimous decision, where this time around, this was Holloway's to win. And man, that was a grudge match, to say the least, where Poirier got knocked down within the first minute and a half. And then in the second round, Poirier got back at Holloway where he gets knocked down. And it was just back and forth. And I love the final, 20 seconds where they knew that the match was coming to an end. And Holloway, he gave him his props. They did a fist bump and almost like just a greeting out of respect and out of love. But then I think that fist bump was like, yo, let's give the crowd a show. Let's give the people at home a show. And man, they just went at it, toe to toe, body blows, trying to go for the head. listen, those guys are a lot better than I am, and that is a barbaric sport. I know I haven't really wrapped my arms around the MMA dating back to its inception, and even though I'm still well behind, I'm like at preschool level. And I brought up Poirier and Holloway for a reason, because I knew that this was, and I didn't realize that, my bad for not even mentioning that this was Poirier's last fight, and knowing that he went out, granted it was a loss, but he certainly went out in a fury, and that was one that the fans certainly got their money's worth, and that was one that was certainly entertaining. Of course, it's a brutal sport. There's just blood everywhere. I mean, listen, I'm not telling you guys and gals anything that you don't know when you watch the sport. But again, I'm a novice when it comes to MMA, and watching it on a consistent basis and being able to really fully embrace the sport on a whole. And I've embraced it, but I'm talking about really getting into it. And I know it's a bad job on my part. A lot of that has to do with just me not going all in on a sport that has certainly blossomed into one of the bigger sports that are out there, as you know. And because of it, I have to be more on top of it as a sports show to share with everybody. I just can't poo-poo it, or just can't say, oh yeah, and Holloway beat Poirier in 5 rounds, and oh, it was a good fight, and oh yeah, you saw him at the end. All right, and then sign off. No, can't cheat you guys. I gotta give you a little something on it. And that was, let me tell you something, that was as entertaining as it comes, or as it gets. And I understand it's not for the weary, it's not for the weak stomach. And even still, I know I have a tough time with that. And people say, well, JAYREELZ, you watch boxing over the years. But yeah, but you don't have it to a scenario where the potential of a leg getting snapped, or an arm getting broken, or literally somebody's face, not just nose broken, which we've seen, or eyes cut in boxing. Hasim Rahman is one in that heavyweight fight, I believe it was against Lennox Lewis, where he had that big giant knot, looked like somebody snuck a softball under his forehead. And I get it, boxing is brutal and can be brutal, but not as brutal as MMA. The cauliflower ears, the just everything. The nose just flattened and just destroyed. And boxing has that too, I get it. But the bigger question, and I'll pose to the fans out there, does Dustin Poirier belong on MMA or UFC, whatever you want to call it, Mount Rushmore? And I'm not talking about being a lightweight or being the best in their division. Because, right, we could break down the division who belongs in that pantheon. But I know John Jones, I get he's a heavyweight, but I know John Jones is a guy that you can't even argue. He's on that Mount Rushmore of MMA. Can you argue Conor McGregor? I guess maybe to a certain extent. I'm sure there's a lot of people say, hell no, not Conor McGregor. Does Poirier belong in Mount Rushmore? Does a guy like Francis Ngannou, does he belong on Mount Rushmore? And I could go through the whole list of guys that belong there. I'm just not going to go through the list of MMA fighters that I'm just going to throw out. Oh, is this name stick or whatever? No. But I think I gave you those 4 names that you could argue. 2 you can't argue, but some you could say, no, I put Poirier in there before McGregor. Or no, there's no way that McGregor should be off of Mount Rushmore. I mean, that's an interesting debate. And even though I'm not big on the debates, the whole, who's the GOAT of all time in the NBA, or who's the best quarterback in the NFL right now, I know that gets tiresome and regurgitated. It's just regurgitated nonsense when you ask the regular sports fan, or even the kook like me, where it's like, oh, again with this. But for Poirier, because he exits stage right, because he calls it a career, does he belong on Mount Rushmore? What do you guys and gals think? Please leave a comment in the description, or leave a comment in the notes below. I'll be more than happy to follow up and answer that, because it is one that I would think, me as a sports fan, and not knowing the sport A to Z, inside out, upside down, but I would think he's worthy of being on Mount Rushmore for whether UFC fighters or MMA. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that. And then with Manny Pacquiao, and this is going to be quick. I didn't even know. It wasn't even on my radar. I saw it Saturday morning on I believe it was on ESPN.com, or maybe one of the other sports websites that I watch, or I check my sports news from. And I saw that. I said, wait a minute, Pacquiao's fighting tonight? And he went up against a guy that I don't even know if he fell on me, in a one Mario Barrios. So, and the fight was a majority draw, and I get it that Pacquiao brought himself back at the age of 46 to try to become the oldest welterweight champion, and it ended up in a draw. I didn't watch a highlight. I didn't watch anything. Obviously, you had the MMA fight, the UFC fight with Holloway and Poirier that I just discussed. So to me, that was on my radar more so than Pacquiao. So yeah, I mean, that's how far boxing has fallen. To find out day of that Manny Pacquiao's fighting, and who would want to watch Pacquiao at 46, despite the fact that, hey, listen, we know he's one of the all-time greats. We know he's a guy that we've watched over many years, etc. But yeah, really, am I going to be geeked up? Oh, I got to watch Pacquiao? No. Not this guy. And no offense to him, no offense to JAYREELZ, no offense to anybody. But sorry, boxing is a far cry from what it once was, as I've said a million times. And I for sure did not watch that fight. And who knows if Pacquiao is going to come back and try to even fight JAYREELZ again. Because you would think, because it was a draw, he's going to want another crack at whether he or someone else in another class would try to be a champion at his age, which obviously hasn't been done at all. So I guess I'll have to keep this on my radar somewhere down the road to see whether or not Pacquiao is going to get back in the ring to fight for a championship belt, which kind of seen that movie played out once before. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books. As always, thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the wonderful toy department of life called sports. And if you haven't done so, as I mentioned throughout this podcast, please subscribe, rate, review, whether you like to listen to your podcast on Apple or Spotify, the website, JAYREELZ.com, or for the visually inclined, on Spotify, you'll get the video, and on YouTube, the channel, as I've said a million times, at JAYREELZ. For the visually inclined, you can get to watch me live in a living color. And one more time, subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review, share with your family, friends, foes, frenemies, take a screenshot, send it to me on my socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ podcast, or JAYREELZ on Instagram, Twitter, JAYREELZ, the number 1 after it, not #1, just JAYREELZ1. That's it. And then if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, suggestion on the aforementioned, but with the tried and true email at the JAYREELZpodcast@gmail.com, I'll be more than happy to follow up with your responses, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA since birth. And if you couldn't tell over the last hour and change, then you got to come back on Thursday or even Wednesday for a live stream at high noon. And just today, I put up a podcast pregame. I went live on YouTube, and no, not through StreamYard. I went live just from my phone. Maybe I'll go through the camera, through the laptop, etc. come Thursday, or maybe beyond after that. But I'm actually thinking about doing podcast pregames. So a half hour before I start, kind of share with you what the agenda is going to be and anything that you'd like for me to discuss. So keep that in mind, people. Keep that on your radar, because whether it comes to, especially on the YouTube channel, podcasts, live streams, commentary video, critique video, impromptu live streams, podcast pre-games, lifestyle content, vlogs, shorts, I got it all. Again, in the blood and the DNA. And as long as I'm in front of a microphone, camera, my phone, whatever it may be, you know I'm going to give you 100. Nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury, with my thoughts, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on all of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.